Sharp!
It's a movie about a mysterious house, and today is May 22nd, 1966. A family, consisting of parents and their little kid, Avery, lives in it. Avery's father loves to record videos of the family's happy moments. But on that specific day, Avery hears his mom calling him from a hidden closet under the kitchen cabinet. He runs and opens the closet at her mother's request. Mom looks strangely different and pleads with Avery to bring her some food. Avery quickly fetches an apple, but now his mother, looking awfully terrified, demands something to eat for her friend as well.
Can my friend have a snack too?
Meanwhile, Avery's father returns home and tells him to be careful. Just as Avery extends his hand to give the apple to his mom's friend in the closet, she grabs it and chokes Avery's face in her hand. At the same time, Avery's father returns with the camera in his hand, still filming, puts it down, and cries over his son's murder. Fast forward to the year 1987. Avery's father, Harold, has grown old and invites a videographer to his home. Apollo walks all the way to the Weems' home from the train station. Harold Weems welcomes Apollo and offers him something to eat before they start working. But Apollo, despite being tired from the long walk, refuses to eat anything. He just drinks a full glass of water and decides to start work right away. Apollo discusses the price of the videography and shares that he has no wife or girlfriend waiting for him at home, so he can work for any length of time. Apollo sets up the camera, and Mr. Weems begins by stating that all these years, he has carried the burden of the accusation that he killed his wife.
I am a killer.
But through this video, he will clear up this misunderstanding because he knows who killed his wife and son. With this initial statement, Mr. Weems invites Apollo to come downstairs, where he first found the body of his deceased wife when he returned home. Apollo continues recording as Mr. Weems shows the exact spot where the police found the body, which had bite marks all over it. Although he was blamed for being the murderer, the bite marks didn't match his dental records. Mr. Weems refuses to say anything about his son.
Don't mention my son.
Suddenly, Apollo feels a slight interruption in the camera recording and fixes it with a screwdriver. During that break, Mr. Weems asks him to come upstairs and shows him the amazing wildlife photography he used to do in the past. It's daytime, and the neighbor kids are playing in front of the window. Apollo and Mr. Weems smile as the kids act scared because everyone in the neighborhood believes there is a witch living in the house. Mr. Weems offers Apollo to pay him triple if he stays in his house the whole day, finishes his work, and then he will personally drop him off at the train station at night. Apollo agrees, as he too wants to finish the work the same day. Once again, Apollo goes downstairs and re-watches the previous recording. Suddenly, he stops as he notices someone standing behind Mr. Weems and brightens the screen to see clearly. It's a tall, human-like figure. Apollo's mind is not functioning properly, and he can't focus, so he returns upstairs, where Mr. Weems shows him the recordings of his wife's murder and the terror in her eyes. But Apollo is too drowsy and falls down. The next time Apollo opens his eyes, he finds himself in the basement with his hands tied behind a chair. He is still too drowsy to focus on anything, but he understands that he is trapped. Mr. Weems victoriously tells him that even though Apollo refused to eat anything, he managed to give him water laced with sedative pills.
In that kitchen was drugged. Soup.
Apollo pleads to be let go, but Mr. Weems resumes recording and explains that the hidden witch of the house, named Beezel,
Calls herself Beezel. Man,
feeds on the flesh of the living and has chosen him to be her servant. He has fed her successfully all these years, but his deceased wife was reluctant to serve this purpose, and then Beezel feasted on her for several days. Now that he has remarried, his second wife supports him in this purpose.
help!
Meanwhile, Apollo manages to get the screwdriver in his hand that he was carrying to repair the camera. He struggles to free his hands from the ropes, and just as Mr. Weems feels Beezel invading his body, Apollo stabs the screwdriver into Mr. Weems's neck. He falls down, and his wife hears him die while sitting on the stairs. Apollo struggles to loosen the ropes around his feet to run away, but before he can, Beezel approaches him and separates his head from his torso to fulfill her hunger. Mrs. Weems returns upstairs and shuts the door. Afterwards, she throws Apollo's camera into the basement and locks it again. Many years pass, and Mrs. Weems is too weak to get up from her bed. It's November 2003, and a nurse named Naomi comes to look after her. She parks her car and turns on the lights in the house. Finally, Naomi finds Mrs. Weems lying on the bed in a quiet room. Naomi tells her that she is here to replace Charlotte. Mrs. Weems gives a broad smile that quickly fades as if she sees Beezel by her room's door. Naomi cannot understand and thinks it's normal for a non-responsive patient. She quickly brings canned food from the kitchen and starts feeding her, but Mrs. Weems refuses to eat anything. Naomi excuses herself, saying she has no idea what Charlotte was feeding her, as Charlotte disappeared without a note or any warning. Suddenly, the spoon falls, and when Naomi bends down to pick it up, she finds a recorder. Taking it along with the food tray, she returns to the kitchen to put the plates away. But in the hallway, she hears some noise. After opening a mysterious door, Naomi discovers a room downstairs. The whole situation terrifies her, and she quickly shuts the door. Naomi was informed that Mrs. Weems can't speak, but when she returns to her room, Mrs. Weems is crying and expresses deep regret that she was unaware of who Beezel was. Then her voice changes, and Beezel speaks through her mouth, saying that she must be fed to be pleased.
Feed her.
Naomi thinks that Mrs. Weems speaks in her sleep. Naomi fails to understand and turns on the recording by Charlotte. Charlotte shares her experience, saying that she felt strange in the house from the beginning, as if someone was watching her. In the end, she sobs while Mrs. Weems pleads that she can't do it, but someone commands her to kill Charlotte. Naomi turns off the recorder and returns to Mrs. Weems's room. She puts the recorder down and sits beside her bed. After a while, Naomi falls asleep, and in that brief sleep, she dreams of Mrs. Weems looking at her closely, with fluid dripping from her mouth. Naomi wakes up and leaves the room. This time, she hears the recording of the last few minutes, where Mrs. Weems pleads to spare Naomi. In the end, Beezel says hello to Naomi. With that, the lights outside the house begin flickering. Naomi sees someone standing outside the window. She runs outside, but the figure disappears. Naomi shuts the door, and once again she hears voices coming from the basement. Believing someone is troubling Mrs. Weems, she goes downstairs, determined to help her. Naomi hears someone crying inside a hidden closet.
Mrs. Weems?
It's Charlotte, gravely injured and unable to move. Suddenly, Beezel appears from behind, chewing on Charlotte's body. Naomi tries to run away, but Beezel never lets her escape. 10 years pass, and Mrs. Weems's son Lucas, whom she abandoned after marrying Mr. Weems, enters the house with his wife, Nova. She is fond of making videos and reaches into the hidden closet where Beezel killed Naomi and other nurses. In her recording, she states that her mother-in-law killed the nurses here. This is well known in the town. She shuts the closet and goes outside to see her husband. They love each other and play together in the snow for a little while. Afterwards, they return inside and order some food. Nova wants to have a kid with him, but he is not ready yet. Disappointed, Nova takes the last shot of today's film, saying that she loves him but can hardly please him in any way. He apologizes to Nova for his difficult behavior and begins to explain that he has never been to this home before. His mother married Mr. Weems, but he never met her after the marriage and was never invited here either. The doorbell rings, and the delivery man hands over the ordered food. But in the next moment, he runs away as if he has seen a ghost. Lucas can't get it out of his head, but does not share it with Nova. Nova, in a romantic mood, touches him, but he brutally scolds her and leaves the dinner table. Nova feels incredibly humiliated. The night passes, and the next morning, as Nova takes a shower, a bird strikes the shower window and dies. She finishes her shower and blow-dries her hair when she hears a noise in the cupboard. There is an opening beneath it. On the other hand, Lucas fixes the for sale sign in front of the house. Meanwhile, Nova finds her mother-in-law's closet and wears a nightgown to get closer to her husband. She wants to have kids, but Lucas does not want any children. Nova even expresses her wish to live in this house, as it is a great place for a family. But Lucas shuts her down, saying it's his place to make decisions about the house, and he has decided to sell it and return to Paris. That night, Nova wakes up when she hears some noise. Lucas does not wake up even after she tries to rouse him. So, Nova sets up the camera to see what's on the other side of the bed. She watches creepy feet coming closer, and ultimately that thing jumps onto their bed and gets intimate with Lucas. The next morning, Nova wakes up, assuming she had a weird dream. But when she turns on the camera, the video recording stuns her. She immediately begins searching for Luke to show him, but she stops at the basement when she hears noise coming from there. She looks everywhere and starts making a movie altogether. There, she finds the camera and things that belong to Apollo and takes them with her. Suddenly, she stops after hearing a baby cry coming from the same cupboard where Beezel killed the nurses. Nova picks up a cloth and becomes ecstatic to find a newborn baby in it. She hugs it and tries to calm it while touching its tiny fingers. At the same time, Lucas arrives, searching for her, and sees Nova hugging a cloth. He takes a closer look and feels disgusted to see that Nova was hugging a dead cat. He snatches it away and throws it in the dustbin. The house has messed up Nova's mind, and she cries her heart out, as if Lucas has snatched her own baby. Lucas, on the other hand, wants to get rid of the house quickly at any cost and return. He calls the realtor to say that he is ready to sell the house at any price. He returns to the house and finds all the knives scattered on the kitchen floor. After putting them all back, Lucas notices that one is missing, the one Nova was carrying in her hand. As he hugs her, he sees that Nova is still recording. Curious, Lucas opens the camera when he is alone to watch what Nova has been recording so far. He is appalled to see a video of himself and Nova at night. Furious, he demands to know about the video. Lucas doesn't remember it at all, while Nova's eyes look as though she is under Beezel's influence. She tells Lucas that Beezel will be pleased. Lucas finds Charlotte's voice recorder and listens to it, then watches the murder video of Mr. Weems's first wife and son. He is horrified to see Mr. Weems's son's disfigured face. Lucas turns to Nova and tells her that something strange is going on in this house and they need to leave immediately. At that moment, Lucas receives a call from the realtor saying he sold the house, but the process will take a few months to complete. Lucas accepts the offer anyway, but the next day he finds Nova vomiting in the washroom. Assuming that she is going to be a mother, which he did not want, Lucas confronts her. He wants her to tell him the truth, but Nova looks at him strangely. She doesn't answer, but Lucas informs her that they are returning to Paris tomorrow, as he is handing over the sale of the house to the realtor. Acting oddly, Nova suddenly gets down and bites Lucas's private part. At that moment, he opens his eyes and realizes that it was the dream. He was okay and was in bed, sleeping with Nova. Lucas shuts his eyes and wakes up again in the morning. The video camera is recording, and suddenly Nova attacks him with a kitchen knife. She stabs him in the chest several times until he dies. Afterwards, she drops the knife in the snow outside the house and begins recording again. She is overjoyed that she is going to become a mother. A few months later, she gives birth to the baby and dies on the basement floor while Beezel eats her baby alive. The realtor closes the deal with the new homeowners, and the new family with their kids moves into the house. The cheerful family looks happy upon their arrival, and the kids quickly choose their favorite spots in the house. The movie ends here. If you like this movie, then don't forget to subscribe the channel.